actual movement there. I mean, you can see the sap moving, and they do things, right? Yeah, they're different than rocks. Never heard anyone at this point referring to rocks as having souls until the first one that taught me that was Yoda. You think about it, rocks. You have to speak grammatically incorrectly when you're being Yoda, for some reason. I don't know why. When 700 years old, you will look as good, you will not, etc. I don't know why, He's probably still talking the way he did when he was a youth. Maybe, I don't know. Okay, so we've got different categories. And notice how they overlap, and some are not overlapping. In fact, they're self-rejecting in a way, because dogs and cats. No dogs or cats. Everyone agrees, right? Well, this brings us to an interesting part of Aristotle, and that is that little chart I showed you at the very first class, the traditional square of opposition. And I wanted to get to these statements, because my quiz question for you today, by the way, I'd love to ask you what's your favorite song. And if you like, you can send me your favorite song. Send the link to whatever your favorite song is. I like listening to all those different kinds of things. But the quiz question for today is, send me a true sentence. It's not really a question. Send me a true sentence. Can you give me a true sentence? That makes it more of a question.
Does a true sentence exist for us to be defining one?
I would argue yes. And Aristotle is the one that really persuaded me to think this way. Now, who knows? Maybe Aristotle got a lot of this from his predecessors, but Ellie?
Does the sentence have to be true with all the stipulations that come with the sentence? Because if you say 2 + 2 = 4, that's not necessarily true if you're using a different number system.
I would say that unless you stipulate that there are other systems that would make that false in other situations, that you wouldn't have to mention it, because that's one of the ones I would think, 2 + 2 = 4 is a statement that's true.
Okay.
Or, that's what the teacher does to you, right?
Okay, so can a fact be a true? Like
good question. Wouldn't used to have been a question before, but after the last couple of years, with alternate facts, certainly is a good question. And I guess a point would be that for a statement to be true, or a sentence to be true, and I don't want to be confusing there, a sentence to be true, that's to be true in a language. Ooga Mooga might not be,
the best way.
yeah, I don't know what that would mean unless, you told me what language it was and what it was supposed to be. Whether it was from an old cowboy movie or something, or, I don't know where that kind of stuff comes from. But yeah, it has to be in a language. The reason that we're all going to agree that it's true is because we're all fluent speakers of that language, and we know what those categories are of the two terms in the statement or the sentence. Yeah.
So like a sentence like water can make you wet is more acceptable than water is wet.
Water is wet. We wouldn't disagree with that. That would be clearly a good example of a true sentence, right?
Depending on who you ask.
Water can make you wet would not be as good, because that's a hypothetical, actually. It can make you wet. Well, what are you trying to tell me here?
It's a threat.
I get in the shower, turn on the cush, dry water. Who'd have thought of it, Could be, well, maybe, I don't know, yes.
I think like the only situation of dry water would probably be in space.
I was thinking that, when you're, and they've got these balls floating around. Looks so weird, Okay. Aristotle gives us these 4 statement types: the universal affirmative, the universal negative, the particular affirmative, and the particular negative. And those are it. I mean, I can utter all sorts of things like, yippee! That's neither true nor false. I can say, oh, Father, come weep with me, past help, past hope. Exclamatory also, right? I suppose. Father Lawrence, that's Juliet, etc. How old are you? Don't answer that. But notice, that's a question. Questions are utterances, but at the same time, they're neither true nor false, right? Imperatives, that's where the Juliet, shut the door, that's an imperative, neither true nor false. So we have utterances that we could say, and it gets even more complex for us, especially once we get into the analytic period. But what Aristotle basically is giving us here are what we would call today the declarative sentences. And these are the simple ones. So some people will send me things like, snow is cold and wet. Okay, well, I would have to break that down and say snow is cold, yes. Snow is wet. Maybe not. You get cold enough, it can be pretty dry, right? So, that's a hard one. So if you were to say snow is cold and wet, they said, well, maybe not. Snow is cold, I'll go with that, etc., right? Actually, if, it's so cold and you bury yourself in the snow, that's a worm resort to this, because the snow is hovering right around, 32 degrees? Yeah, it's like an insulation. So what he's doing here is he's saying we've got a category. In this case, it's the subject. S stands for the subject of the sentence. And P stands for the predicate. And it's weird because we normally, I think of predicates as action. I'm walking across the room, but for Aristotle, the predicate is the predicate set. So you've got the subject set of the category, and the predicate set. So all horses are animals. That's about as easy as I could go with that, right? No cats or dogs. True, right? Some cats are dogs. False. Right? Some dogs are not cats. Well, that's true. That's just weird to say, but it's true, right? Why is it weird to say? Because if I were to say, some paperback books are expensive, some paperback books are not expensive. When we're talking about the particular statements, that seems to be that some are and some are not is kind of the rule. When you're using that. But these are the universals. This one the affirmative, this one the negative. And you can see the relationships that they have here. If I'm using exactly the same subject set and predicate set, so all blondes have more fun. No, they don't, actually. I've had some blondes tell me, no, not all blondes have more fun. Well, that statement doesn't actually fit, but what they're doing is giving me a counterexample. Some blondes do not have more fun, right? So it's false that all blondes have more fun. But it's also false that no blondes have more fun, because some blondes do have more fun, apparently. right? At least sometimes, I don't know, that work. So it's true that there are some lawns that have more fun. So if I'm using the exact same subject and predicate categories on this square, which is the only time your statement is going to fit on this square. If I have two different, every horse is an animal, and no dogs or cats, no, I'm messing up the square. That's not how it works. They have to be the same S and P in all four places. And then what you can see is that if this statement is true, this statement is false, because it contradicts this. This statement is not a contradiction of it, it's a contrary. And these are sub-contraries, because they're below on the square, right? There's all kinds of neat things here. We get, since this is A and I, where did that come from? From the Latin, not Aristotle, affirmo. So I affirm these are both affirmative. And over here I've got nego, or I deny. Is this news to anyone? Or have you heard this before? This whole square business? No? It's kind of new? It's cool stuff. So, and of course this leads on, you have all these relationships here. If you read this particular article, you'll see that it gets more complex in modern times because of issues we have over existence, which Aristotle apparently was never concerned about the existence of unicorns. But you get all these relationships, and that leads on to the Aristotelian. Oops. The syllogisms. So, statements are true or false. These are where some of these, he's got multiple books, the categories on interpretation, prior analytics, posterior analytics topics, and on sophistical refutations. Also, all referred to as the organon, or the tool. When you get to Francis Bacon, which we'll just briefly touch on much later, Francis Bacon writes the novum organum, which means the new tool, because he's trying to introduce us to inductive logic, which Aristotle doesn't. Aristotle mentions it a little bit, but mostly this is all deductive logic. And so when we look at the syllogisms, what Aristotle gives us are those syllogisms that are valid. And we can, I think, let me see if it covers that here. The figures. Okay, so the figures are the shapes. And how do we get to those? Well, the divine argument would be, for example, AAA1. And what is that figure? And so on. So I'm using A statement, A statement, A statement. And it's in figure 1, which uses a middle term on the left and on the right. I'm probably just going to confuse you with that, unless I do a better job of where the form comes from. Let me try a different page here. Yeah, there's okay, so let's I don't know what medium means, or so on. I don't like it. Oh, it's too confusing. Oh, well, you probably have heard this argument before as an example. All men are mortal. Socrates is a man, and therefore Socrates is mortal. So all men are mortal is an A statement. Socrates is a man is by some considered to be an A statement because you're saying that all of the things that are in the set of things that are Socrates are in the set of things that are a man. So it's AA, and therefore Socrates is mortal would be also an A statement. So Socrates is mortal. And if we look at this, notice that men really should be here and here. And so what you've got is a middle term, because what we get down here is Socrates, which is the subject term of the conclusion, and mortal is the predicate term of the conclusion. So in my two premises for my syllogism, to show that this is the case, I've got a middle term, which is not going to be in the conclusion. The middle term is men. Right? And so what we've got is this middle term that's in this place and this place. So this is figure 1. Figure 1 goes this way, figure 2 goes this way, figure 3 goes this way, and figure 4 goes this way. Depends on where the middle term is.